seconds and I forget. Did I turn it on? Man. All right. So you think that this is going to be all over the place. If I can't remember from there to there if I turned it on, then who knows what we'll end up talking about today.
That's all good.
We're going to continue in the story of us. I'm thinking about breaking this thing into the story of us in Genesis, and then the story will go into a different story when we get into the Exodus and other stuff. But today we're going to continue talking on about, remember last week we were talking about Abraham and he took Isaac, and Isaac was traumatized, and so he led a pretty peaceful life after that, I'm sure. So Isaac goes on, and Isaac has a couple of sons. He marries the girl of his dreams, and if you're in love and stuff like that, then I guess you can read all about that. We're not going to cover that because we don't talk about that kind of mushy stuff. But he has a couple of sons. Now, this is a kind of crazy thing because Isaac has his wife, and they have twins. And the thing is, these twins, they start fighting while inside the womb. They're like already at each other. And that's, brothers. What are you going to do? And so they have one son. And all the Bible really tells us is when he was born is that he was red and covered with fur. This kid was red and covered with fur. One of the verses, I think it's in the King James, there's one of my favorite verses, and Esau was a hairy man. That was the only verse I could remember when I was a kid. So when you had to stand up and do the scripture memory, and Esau was a hairy man. So Esau was extremely hairy, and we'll get to how hairy in a second, okay? Because this dude was like abnormally furry. And the thing is, then they have a second son, and the son that comes out, he's like, as Esau is coming out, then the other son has hold of his heel when he's coming out. Like, he's not even letting go then. They're like fighting it up as they're being born. And so they named this son Jacob. You know those Jacobs. Any Jacobs in here? Here, let's talk about them. Jacob means trickster or swindler. And if you've ever been around many Jacobs, they are, right? They're little tricksters. Every Jacob I've ever met was kind of like that. They're always like practical jokers. But this guy, Jacob, the second son, now in this time, the second son, the first son and the second son, the first son had the birthright and also the blessing of the father. So he was the most important. The second son, which I was, the best son. You know what I'm saying? The second son knew everything, and no. The second son really didn't have much going for him. Now, these two guys grew up, and they were different. Now, I see a lot of twins, and they're do the same things, and they're finish each other's sentences. And anybody twins in here? Let's talk about them. It's kind of a strange thing how they think and how they process and what all goes on with these twins. But these particular twins were not the same. Man, they were like polar opposites. Esau, the hairy one, the red hairy one, he was a man's man, hunter, smelled like the field. His father literally says he smells like the field. And so he's the stinky one. He's out and he's killing stuff and slaying stuff, and he was his father's favorite. His father loved him, was crazy about him. And he was like a kid that's my boy, that kind of thing. And then Jacob, he liked to hang out around the tents. And he cooked with mom, and he, was a little mama's boy. Second son. You know how it is, man. He smelled nice. He took lavender baths. something. I don't know. He took a bath, period. That was probably the difference. Like, he bathed, he was clean. But he cooked, but the way these boys got along, they just didn't get along at all. But Jacob was Rebekah's favorite, his mom's favorite, and Esau was Isaac's favorite. And I guess then it was politically correct to have favorites, or they just weren't shy about it. I mean, they wrote in a Bible, so like that stuck around a while. So you got that thing, and so one day Esau was out hunting, okay. And evidently this dude have an appetite and didn't kill anything because he was hungry. And I mean hungry, like to the point of death. He had to have something to eat. So when he comes in from out doing his thing, guess who's there cooking up some stew? Jacob. So Jacob, being the good brother that he is, doesn't offer Esau any stew, but he makes a proposition. I'll give you a bowl of stew for your birthright. Remember, birthright is everything, right? That's your inheritance. That's the ace number one, place you want to be. And evidently, man, Esau had this low blood sugar thing where he loses mind when he didn't eat for a while. Anybody else do that? I do that, man. And then when I start eating, I go crazy. Like it just, you lose your mind. You're like food, and you're it's just killing it. And so he trades his birthright. Jacob swindles his brother out of his birthright for a bowl of stew. Now that's got to be some kicking stew, right? I mean, you have to think this was no ordinary stew. Like this is something that's magic stew. I don't know. It's just like some incredible, I don't even know what they would put in that stew to make it that good, but it was, it was good. Bananas or something. I don't know. I don't know what you put in stew to make it magical, but it was magical. He must have had prehistoric rotel or something, because that's makes everything good. And so anyway, this was some kicking stew. So he swindles his brother out of his birthright. So there's a little issue between the two, as you can imagine, right? And so the story goes on, and one day as Isaac gets old and he's to the point of death, his wife overhears Isaac telling Esau that he wanted him to go hunt and he wanted him to bring him back and fix him a meal from the field, a man's meal, like campfire goat or whatever they eat. I don't know. But he wanted him fixing this awesome wild game, man's man meal, where you don't have silverware or napkins. You just grab it and you eat, And that's what he was wanting. And he said, we'll do this, and then I'm going to pass my blessing on to you. Huge deal, the blessing, passing on of the blessing from the Father. So Rebekah goes and tells her favorite, come here, Jacob, goes and tells Jacob, here's what we're going to do. You go out and you kill some of our animals and you prepare, and I'll prepare this meal. And then you'll go into your father, because at this time Isaac's blind. He's going really blind. He can just see shapes, right? And so he's really at the point of death. He's old and he's really about to die. And so Jacob says to his mom, well, he's not going to buy it because he's going to want to touch me. He's going to want to smell me. A whole different culture. It's see, my mom could always tell me from my brothers because they stink. older sons, right? My brother will probably listen to that too. Then we'll have to fight again. So he says he's going to want to touch me. And you know Jacob, man, he's fair-skinned. He's putting on the lotion at night, and his hands are soft, and, you know, and he's taking his salt baths and all that. And Esau's a hairy man. So Rebekah says, here, we'll skin these animals, and we'll put the goat's furs over your arms. Goat fur. This Esau character was hairy, man. And I'm not, this is unnatural, right? So they devise this plan. So Jacob goes into his father and takes the food, and he says, who are you? And he says, I'm Esau, your older son. You're you know, the son that's getting a blessing. And he says, come here, let me touch you. And it says that Isaac smelled him, and he smelled like goat. And so he knew it was Esau. Like, man, Esau, I'm telling you, this character was stinky. So, and then he touches his arms covered with goat fur and says, oh, it is you, Esau. I mean, get that? Like, this dude is that. Have you ever petted a goat? Man, that's unbelievable. And so he gives his blessing and makes an oath before God and blesses Jacob. About that time, Esau comes in from the field and prepares his dad the meal. He goes in, and his dad says, I already blessed you. And they put it all together, and he figures out that not only did Esau jack him out of his birthright, he jacked him out of his blessing. It says that he hated Esau. Esau hated Jacob for taking his birthright, for taking his blessing from his father. So all that Isaac had would go now to Jacob when it was rightfully Esau's. Now, we don't live in that kind of world because we just say, no, you stick it, I'll take you to court, right? Or something like that. Like, no, this is mine, this is what we're going to do. We'll settle this the usual way, you know, and arm wrestle for it or something. I don't know. But these guys hate each other. So Jacob takes all of his stuff and he heads out because his mom says, you know, your brother's going to kill you. And so she says, go stay with my family. And so he leaves and he stays with his mom's family. And he meets a girl that he wants to marry. And this is a whole complicated, long story. But in any case, he ends up marrying who he thought was the younger sister, marries the older sister, then has to come back and marry the younger sister. And her father wouldn't just give her hand. He made Jacob work 7 years and then tricked him. Then he had to work 7 more years, and then he finally got to marry the love of his life. And so now he's got 2 wives, and they start having kids, and they have, you know, what turns into be like a dozen kids, right? From his 2 wives. So Jacob is married now, and so he comes up with this thing. This is a pretty cool part of the story. So I'm just catching you up. We're going somewhere though. We'll get there in a second. Have you guys heard this story? This is a cool story. Okay, so Jacob goes to his father-in-law and says, let's make a deal. I'll take all of the sheep that are black and speckled and striped and whatever and leave you the rest, okay? And his father-in-law was like, yeah, sounds like a pretty good deal, because they were considered to not be the most valuable. So what Jacob did is he swindles his father-in-law. He goes and he would find the biggest, most healthy sheep, and when they would come to eat, he would strip sticks and put dotted sticks and striped sticks in front of them while they ate. And when they would have their babies, they would be striped and spotted. Don't ask me why. If you want to try it, go for it. Did he know something that we don't know? Did God talk to him about that? I have no idea why. I just know that it worked. And so his sheep just began to be just huge, and they were healthy and they were strong. And his father-in-law's sheep, they were weak, but they were all, solid and like supposed to be the best. And so he jacks his father-in-law out of all of these sheep, and so his father-in-law gets angry, so he takes off. He gathers up his wife and his wives and kids. Like, there's a whole different lesson in that. But he gathers up his wives and kids, and they take off, and he's going back to his father's land. Okay, God tells him, I'm going to be with you. I'll walk with you. I'll bless you. We're going back to your father's land. So as he starts to get near, he realizes that his brother Esau is not going to be happy to see him. Right? And so he kind of freaks out. And so he decides then that he sends messengers with gifts to try to ease the confrontation. But here's what happens. Let me see. We're in Genesis. We're in Genesis 32. And so what he had done is he sent for this, and the people came back and they said, your brother's coming. He's got like 400 people with him. That's not good news, right? And so Jacob freaks out. So Jacob says, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to split everything we have into two camps. Because if my brother goes to attack one, at least the other will flee and survive. So he splits them into two camps. And then they get ready to meet with Esau. And this is in Genesis 32, verse 22. It says, that same night he arose, Jacob, and he took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, his 11 children, and crossed the ford back to Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had. So he was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until the break of day. And when the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. All right, y'all getting this story? Crazy, isn't it? I love these Bible stories because they're just crazy. So Jacob's left there all alone. Now, I don't know if he's sucking on a peyote twig. I don't know what's going on, but somehow a man appears, right? Man appears and they wrestle all night. Wrestling. You want to wrestle? I mean, I see this guy coming out of the bushes. Hey, boy, you want to wrestle? That's a weird thing today, right? But I guess back then, totally normal. Yeah, sure, why not? Let's wrestle all night. They're in pretty good shape, too, because, man, I remember wrestling with my brother. There's no way, man. It wasn't going all night because that's just too much. So anyway, Jacob's wrestling with this man all night long. And when it comes morning, his guy's tired, and so he touches Jacob's hip and puts it out of socket. Anybody ever had their hip come out of socket? Yeah, mine comes out occasionally. If I'm walking up here one day and just fall off the stage, you'll kind of know what's up. Mine will come out occasionally. It's painful, right? Like when it comes out, it's painful, and you walk around like this for a couple of days. So I know you needed imagery for that. But, okay, so he wrestles with him all night. And he said in verse 26, and he said, let me go, for the day, this is the man says this, let me go, for the day has broken. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And he said to him, what is your name? If you're following along in your Bible, circle that. What is your name? What is your name? And he said, Jacob, which a name meant something back then. A lot of people don't even know what their names mean, but a name meant something back then. And so as he's telling him, what's your name? My name's Trickster, Swindler, right? And then the man said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. The man he was wrestling with was God. It was God. He fought with God. He wrestled with God all night long. And he would not let him go until he blessed him. And God said to him, what is your name? My name is Israel. My name is Jacob, Trickster, Swindler. And he says, now your name is Israel. And Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of that place Peniel, saying, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. And the sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. One thing I think about that is like, you realize the next day he's limping away, which tells us what? It's no dream. It wasn't made up. It wasn't something that happened in his head. His hip's out of place. But I want to look at this as our story, because that's kind of a crazy story. And some of you guys are like, no, that's my family. So like you're like, oh, that's not that weird. It's a crazy story, and we look at it and we say, well, how is this my story? But I start to look at our lives. And man, we live our lives and we make mistakes and we go through things and we find ourselves in situations, and we come, as we grow, we come to this place where we are known as whatever. I'm an alcoholic. What's your name? I'm an addict. What's your name? Anger. What's your name? I'm bitter. You know, we have this reputation. People know us as, oh, you're that guy. Oh, I know him. He's that guy. He's a thief. He's an abusive drunk. He's this. He's that. You know, he's an adulterer. She's an adulterer. She's a slut. She's this. We get this reputation, and that becomes our identity, and we live our lives. And the longer you live in these identities, the harder it is for people to not expect you to live up to your namesake, right? Like, you guys, like, I grew up in this town, like a small town, and it's extremely hard to not live out your namesake. Once you get a reputation, people expect you to be that. And it's really hard to break out of that, isn't it? You guys know about this stuff. And even for ourselves, man, when we're asked our name, what's our name? I'm an alcoholic. It's who I am. I'm an addict. That's who I am. I can't break that cycle. I've been this way. This is who I am. That's who I'm always going to be. And so when we're asked, what is our name? Who are we? And we seem to kind of live up to that name. But I love this story. I love this story because Jacob lived up to his name in every way. The reason I went into this long story of telling you his life is because from the time he came out, he was tricking and swindling. He stole his brother's birthright. He tricked his brother out of his blessing. He jacked his father. He swindled his father. He swindled his father-in-law. His whole life had been nothing but deceptions. He was living a lie his whole life. But his name was Jacob, and that's what was expected of him. And when he would meet somebody new and he would say, my name is Jacob, they would know what to expect. But he comes to this fork in the road. He comes to this climax. He comes to this place of decision. And this man comes out of the bushes and says, you want to wrestle? And he wrestles with the man all night. Has anybody ever wrestled with God all night?
Oh, yeah.
Man, those are not fun nights. I've had many. I wish I could say, oh yeah, I remember that night. How many have wrestled with God more than once? Yeah. Seems to be an ongoing thing. I can see God in his little wrestling suit, popping his thing. You know, what? I don't know how they do it. I don't know if God is one of those like WWF wrestlers or, you know, I don't know, Nature Boy God. I don't know if he's like that or if he's like one of those high school wrestlers or if he's a sumo wrestler. That's even weird, though, to think of God as a sumo wrestler. MMA, man, no, I don't think I'd want to mess with God MMA style. Maybe sumo, where you just kind of push against each other. I don't know. The thing is, we all wrestle with God. So, like, one of God's traits is wrestler. I mean, we have to think about, you know, everybody's like, oh, God is love. No, God's a wrestler. He wrestles with all of us all the time, doesn't he? But see, here's the thing. A lot of times God wrestles with us and we run and we get away and we leave and we move on and we go back to being Jacob or we go back to being whatever it is that we've been labeled as. We live up to our namesake and we come and we wrestle with God again. But there's this point of decision for everybody where we wrestle with God and we're like, I will not let you go until you change me. Anybody ever been there? When you've just had enough and you draw the line in the sand and you're like, this is it. We're going at it this time and you aren't leaving me this way. And Jacob wrestles with God. And that's our story. We're all Jacob. We all have a name. We're all living up to something until one day we're going to wrestle with God. And for some of you, you haven't made that decision to wrestle with God and say, you are not leaving until I'm different. I have to be relieved from this. I can no longer live this way. And God takes Jacob and he says, what is your name? And I think this is a thing that we like to overlook, man, because we're like, you know my name, you know it. But he wants to hear you say it. What is your name? I'm Todd Box. That's what my name means. Fox. I don't know exactly what that means. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe both. I don't know. No, what is your name? Justice's name is Just One. And if you've ever been around Justice, it's everything has to be fair. That's not fair. I'm going to put on her tombstone, that's not fair. That's all I hear her whole life. That's not fair. That's not fair. She's always for the underdog, but it's just like everything has to be fair. Just One. Ella's name means beautiful. And look at her. I mean, golly. What's your name? And you know, I'm not talking about your name, man. You know, I'm talking about who you are, who you see yourself as. Because God's saying, what is your name? And when I had to look at that, man, when I wrestled with God, man, and it was all night, and it was horrible, and it was a fight, but it was like, I have to either die right now, or you have to change me. Right now. I will not be this way any longer. What's your name? I'm loser. Hard to admit. This is not who I thought I would be, and this is not the image I've tried to build, but I'm a failure. Prideful, self-centered. I'm alcoholic. I don't care about anybody but myself. I'm destroying my family. I'm destroying my wife. I'm destroying my kids. This is who I am. And I think for all of us, we have to come to that place where God says, no, what is your name? Because if you don't know, if you're not willing to take and swallow the pride and admit your name and tell God who you are, you're not ready. You still think you're something else. You're still putting on a role. You're still playing at something else. No, I'm Christian. I go to church. I did a good thing that time, remember? Calling yourself Christian may not be your name. But only you know that. And God is saying, what is your name? And sometimes I think it's so hard for us to admit. See, I grew up in church. I did all the religious things. I took on the name Christian so I could tell people, oh, I'm that good. But it's all lies, all tricks, it's all Jacobs, it's all swindling. And that wasn't true. It wasn't who I was. And God's saying, what's your name? What's your name? And I had to look at myself and say, this is who I am. See, it's brokenness where God needs us. And when God finds us and we're willing to admit our brokenness, then God can put us back together. And God says, your name is no longer Jacob, your name is Israel. A nation. You are a nation. Not only a nation, you are the nation of the children of God. And see, Israel is not a place in the Middle East. Israel is a way of being. It's who we are as children of God. It's when we get the new name. Your new name is Israel. You are the child of the Most High God. This is your new name. And here's the thing, it doesn't matter who you were. It doesn't matter what you've done. Look, if we were taking a poll today, and I told you this story of Jacob, you would not say, oh, that's the guy God chose to make the nation of Israel out of. You would have thought he could have done better. I was kind of like, man, I would have wanted more like Esau. You know what I'm saying? Like, this guy can take care of business. He's hairy. People are scared of hairy people. This is a mighty nation. Hunters and killers and, you know, men's men. But now he takes mama boy who's tricking and swindling everybody out of everything, who's got this life of destruction, this life of being a failure. And God says, no, I want this one. Isn't that great news for us? No, I want this one. This is one I can make something out of. This is one I can make a nation out of. And see, so it doesn't matter where you've been or what you've been through or what you're going through right now or who you think you are. God wants to change your name. He wants to say, no, you are my child. I want to give you a new name. I want to bless you and I want to prosper you and I want to give you life and not just a get by kind of survival life. I want to give you an abundant, over the top, fulfilled, blessed, big time life. And this is what I want for you. And so I find this whole story being a story that happened, but also a story of the birth of a nation. But not just the birth of a nation. I see this being a spiritual thing that is us. This is us. We're all Jacobs. And we all go through things, and we all have identities that are separate from God, and we all build a life that's separate from God. But we all wrestle with God. And then some of us, man, we decide, you know what? I'm not letting you go. I'm not letting you go this time. I want a new name. And we're changed. This writer, Paul, in the New Testament, he says you are recreated into a new and different person. And who the old person was, he's gone. And who Jacob was is gone. That's in the past. And who you were in the past, alcoholic, angry, abuser, those things can go. That life can go. God wants to give you a new name and make you a new person and a new creation. And that's what the story's about. It's the story of us. It's a story of Jacob, but it's our story. It's our story. It's our story of wrestling with God. It's our story of brokenness. It's our story of redemption, of being given right standing with God. It's our story of being taken out of the trickster, swindler life and being handed the life of a new nation, the birth of a new nation. It's our story. And today I hope that you have got that name. And if you have, and if you've wrestled with God and if you've wrestled with God and come out on top and God's given you a new name, I want to remind you that old life is gone. You don't have to live that way anymore. You're no longer tied to that way of being, that way of thinking, that way of living, that hopelessness, that treadmill life where you just run and run and run and never move and never catch up to anything until you just get exhausted and fall on your face and it shoots you through the back wall. That hadn't happened to me, but I've heard stories. It's kind of the way life works. But you don't have to do that anymore, man. We can run in this life. We can live, really, really live. If you're here today, man, though, and you're still Jacob, and you're still in that place, you don't have to stay there. God's behind every bush with his wrestling suit on. He is, man. He's ready to wrestle with you. But listen, they wrestled all night. What I found is God wants us to want it. You really want it? Do you want a new life? Do you want to be changed? Oh, I'll take it if they're giving it away. That's kind of our mentality. Are we willing to fight for it? Are we willing to say, no, I will not let you go until you change me? I hear so many people all the time, yeah, I tried God. And what? Let him go? I tried that God thing. That God thing. Oh, you mean the author and creator of life? I tried that God thing. It didn't really work for me. Fight, wrestle. Do not let him go until he changes your name. And you will never be the same again. You guys stand up with me. I want to pray for you. And I pray that God's going to continue moving in your life. He's going to continue speaking to you. He's going to continue showing you your identity. Man, maybe your identity is still Jacob, and God's going to continue to show you who you really are. But maybe your name's Israel, and God's trying to show you who you really are, and you aren't buying it. You aren't getting that. Listen, you're Israel. God loves you. We are children of the Most High God, the true one and living God. And he isn't angry at you. And he isn't holding your Jacob life over you. Let it go and move in to the life God has for Israel.